Hi, I'm actor Ian Champion, and welcome to History of Horror Cinema, my podcast series devoted to the good, bad, and the ugly of horror movie history. Please don't forget to like what you hear and hit subscribe. I have such sights to show you. Werewolf of London, 1935. In 1935, during the slump period that the horror film went through, Universal gamely tried to keep creating new titles to attract the public. Soon after the excellent sequel Bride of Frankenstein, the studio came up with the first appearance of a brand new monster to add to their Hall of Fame, the Wolfman. Werewolf of London was in fact the first time a werewolf had been seen in a mainstream horror film. It would not prove successful enough to generate a sequel rush. 6 years elapsed before Lon Chaney kick-started their franchise properly with The Wolfman in 1941, and this 1935 version is often overlooked. However, it's well made enough to introduce this iconic creature, albeit a little too reminiscent of Jekyll and Hyde's urban aspect rather than natural primitivism. Henry Hull plays Dr. Wilfrid Glendon, a gruff, driven British botanist of means who travels to Tibet in search of the fabled Marifaza lupino lumino, the wolf flower, that allegedly only blooms in moonlight. He risks everything to secure the exotic plant, including his future when he is attacked by an obscure humanoid figure just as he takes a cutting from it. The creature scratches his hand and arm severely. Once back in his London laboratory, Glendon tries in vain to reproduce an artificial moonlight ray, trained on the transplanted Marifaza. Meanwhile, he is visited by Dr. Yogami, Warner Oland, who claims he met Glendon in Tibet, as his assailant it turns out, and suspects the botanist to be afflicted with the werewolf curse of lycanthropia, which by sheer coincidence can be cured for a few hours at a time by the pollen thorn of the plant. Glendon refuses to reveal his curse, which will set the seal on his fate. Yogami warns him, as he knows only too well, that the werewolf instinctively seeks to kill the thing it loves best. In private, Glendon feels the transformation begin to take hirsute effect upon his arm in a series of dissolve shots, but manages to quell it with plant extract. Hull plays Glendon with an effectively frosty, brooding quality for a gradually tormented soul, and a huskiness to his English tone reminiscent of Colin Clive, though he was actually American. Oland, as Dr. Yogami, was continuing in an Asiatic vein that was already achieving him fame as the wily Chinese detective in the ongoing Charlie Chan film series from 1931 to 37. Oland was in fact Swedish-American, born Johann Werner Oland into a Swedish family that emigrated to the US when he was 13. He claimed some unproven Mongolian ancestry to justify his slightly oriental appearance. Though the term inscrutable is a somewhat racist stereotype, it's an apt description for Oland's playing of Yogami with immensely controlled emotion and guarded expertise, though erring at times into an uncertain line delivery. Adding a love triangle to the increasingly hairy tension is Valerie Hobson as Glendon's wife Lisa, who'd played Baroness Frankenstein that same year for James Whale in Bride of Frankenstein, and would go on to the equal classics back home in England of David Lean's Great Expectations and Edith Gascoigne in Kind Hearts and Coronets. She would later be embroiled by association with a notorious society sex scandal in real life as wife of the disgraced government minister John Profumo. Lisa gamely fends off the old flame of her childhood sweetheart Paul, Lester Matthews, who at first seems a bit of a mustached cad, pointedly remarking that she has lost the sunny temperament she had had when formerly with him, until he's realized as an action man with prior knowledge of a werewolf murderer in the Yucatan. Glendon's first full metamorphosis into a werewolf is artfully staged, melding dissolve photography with cleverly edited shot composition in 3 stages, as he passes behind 2 pillars, each one allowing a cut to a more detailed change, as Hull acquires a widow's peak of hair, pointed ears, and protruding sharp fangs to his lower front teeth. Physically, Glendon's werewolf is reminiscent of Jekyll's Hyde alter ego, more than a primal beast, as instead of fully embracing the lupine predatory animal, his inner creature clothes the outer self in a full gentleman's suit, cap and overcoat each time he heads out to kill. Coupled with the London setting, Robert Harris's script owed a fair amount to Robert Louis Stevenson's novella. Universal's renowned makeup supremo Jack Pierce had designed a more elaborate look for Hull, one identical to the design used on Lon Chaney Jr. in the later The Wolfman. But Hull's great-nephew Cortlandt claimed that the actor wanted a more pared-down aspect on the grounds that other characters would then be able to recognize him. Whether or not this was valid or a performer's vanity, it created a bad working atmosphere between Hull and Pierce, and a look that still took 4 hours to apply each day, roughly the same amount of time it took Pierce to transform Boris Karloff into the Frankenstein monster. Lighter notes are to be played along the way while Glendon succumbs to his terrifying disorder. There is the relentless skepticism of Lawrence Grant's Sir Thomas Forsyth of Scotland Yard, who refuses to believe any evidence no matter what is presented to him. Paul has eyewitness proof of Glendon being the killer when he is attacked by him after he tries to put the moves on her in the woods. Yogami predicts city-wide werewolf contagion unless they confiscate Glendon's Marifaza antidote as a preventative for the people. It takes an overwhelming amount to shake the inspector's disbelief, and Paul is his nephew. The more deliberate fun is the double act of Mrs. Moncaster and Mrs. Whack, a couple of exuberant Cockney landladies, irony-free and with surreally unself-conscious survivalism. Mrs. Whack is proud of her jailbird son's model prisoner status. "I always knew he'd amount to somebody," Moncaster avers. They are injected into the plot as comic relief, as if inspired by James Whale's established trademark of dark comedy to alleviate the horror. Zeffie Tilbury and Ethel Griffiths, respectively, are an unforgettable duo whose bosom friendship bizarrely endures despite just business cutthroat competition with each other, often resulting in unladylike violence. When Glendon comes by looking for private lodgings in the throes of his rampage, Mrs. Moncaster knocks out "my oldest friend" with a sock to the jaw so she can take his custom. Eventually, Forsyth agrees to head to Glendon Manor with Yogami and Paul. Lisa appeals to Glendon's latent humanity, but he is by now too loopy with the lupine, and Forsyth is forced to fatally shoot him. In a touching end, Glendon apologizes to his wife for neglecting her happiness in favor of his scientific mania, and praises her. "Thank you for the bullet. It was the only way." Forsyth softens his British reserve enough to offer framing Glendon's death in his report as occurring whilst trying to protect his wife. Werewolf of London doesn't give us the full moon of werewolf legendary. We must wait till 1941 for Universal to embrace that with The Wolfman. Yet its creation of a new franchise mythology is nonetheless welcome in a period when the horror film was losing potency. Thanks for listening. And if you like what you've just heard, don't forget to click so. And please hit subscribe. If you build it, they will come.